The 438th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We're coming at you on a Friday night about an hour or so after Carolina went to Lawrence, Kansas and took on the number one team in the country, the Kansas Jayhawks, and fell short 92-89 to fall to 1-1 on the season. And we've got a pretty interesting way to talk about this loss. The way Carolina played in the first half, I think you would have gotten some anger and some vitriol because Carolina did not bring their jockstrap. They did not bring their competitive fight, their competitive spirit, and they looked like they were going to get run out of Allen Fieldhouse. They come back in the second half, not only make it a game, they take a lead, but they don't execute the way that you would want them to execute down the stretch to try to find a way to close out the number one team in the country. So we'll talk through all the things from tonight's defeat. We'll take a look at the box score. We'll give the quote of the game from Hubert Davis, stat of the game, takeaways, and a pretty, I think, interesting discussion topic that'll come out of this game. But, we'll go ahead and just get right to it. Carolina falls 92-89. The fifth straight time they've lost to Kansas, and I gotta tell you, I'm sick and tired of doing this. I'm sick and tired of watching us play with Kansas, compete with Kansas, and fall short. And I stand by what I said in the preview podcast that I would have sacrificed a loss to Duke in the regular in February to get this win tonight in November. And when Carolina got back in the game and took the lead, it was even more prevalent for me that I wanted to win this game as bad as I've ever wanted to win a game on November 8th. Carolina fell behind by 20 points. They were down 51-31 in the first half, but managed to make it a 53-38 game going into the locker room. And then they came out in the second half and they made that patented Carolina run, and they got back in the game. And Kansas had to call 2 timeouts because Carolina just kept coming, and they were aggressive and they were putting pressure on Kansas's defense. But ultimately, it wasn't good enough. Down 91-89, Jalen Washington made a 3 to take the lead. Down 92-89, Elliott Cadeau missed a 3 that would have tied the game. All in all, Carolina did not score the final 2 minutes and 3 seconds. And when you do that on the road, anywhere in the country in a tight ball game, let alone in a place like Fog Allen Fieldhouse against the number one team in the sport, you're going to be hard to come away with the win. And it's a big reason why Carolina fell short tonight against the Jayhawks.
Yeah, it's the biggest reason why they fell short because they did everything else right. They battled their way back into this game. They took a lead at one point, and then it came down to offensive execution at the end of the game, which was incredibly frustrating because you would have thought that this would be a group that would be able to execute down the stretch because of how veteran they are. They've got a leader in RJ Davis that you thought would be the guy taking the shots down the stretch. But that's ultimately just not how it worked out in this game. I don't think people would have had an issue with RJ or Seth Trimble taking shots late. I didn't even really have that much of an issue with Cadeau taking the shot at the end because I thought ultimately it was a pretty solid look. It's when you're relying on Jalen Withers and Jalen Washington to make shots from the outside that it becomes a little bit frustrating. And that's really what it comes down to. Offensive execution late in the game. And you got to give it to Kansas, man. They got a dude in Zeke Mayo who is not a starter for them, but he is more than capable of being this team's leading scorer. I said it when we previewed them. I think he is one of the portal gems. And so far, the first 2 games of the year, he's proved it. He could not miss late in this game against Carolina. And so credit to them. They're a hell of a basketball team. And, it's hard for a program like Carolina to take away moral victories. I don't really think it's a moral victory. I think you can say that you love the fight that this team brought in this game to get themselves back into it, but you hated the fact that Carolina lost the game late because they simply couldn't execute the way that they needed to. So, all in all, I think you should still leave feeling positive, but maybe just a little bit frustrated at how the team finished.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, I think encouraged is a good way to describe it. I mean, you went on the road and out rebounded this team. You did a lot of things well that in the second half that you should be able to build upon.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really makes the case for Carolina to really be a top 10 team in the country, which the first 20 minutes they didn't look the part. But this isn't horseshoes. And I know it's a marathon season. We know that losses are going to happen, but this is North Carolina. This is this is Carolina basketball. There's an expectation when you step on the floor, and that's what I message my family group chat. There, my dad's praising the effort, and my brother is saying I'll take that loss because we almost won. Well, by God, I don't want to almost win. I want to win. And this isn't an almost program. This isn't NC State. This is Carolina. And while tonight was fun for the sport and great for the sport, I'm not feeling that right now because I'm talking about a loss. And now maybe the things change down the road. We see this team in March, and we finally getting one over them. But I think that's what makes this weird because man, at halftime I was looking forward to this because for our longtime listeners that listened to us last year, they wanted me to yell after losses to UConn and Kentucky last year, and I couldn't do it because I came away encouraged by what I saw. Tonight, after 20 minutes, if we would have done a halftime check-in, it would have been full blown meltdown, and I would have screamed. But then they play the way they play in the second half. They get a lead, and then the frustration really comes in from doing everything you did to get back in the game, doing everything you did to take a lead in the game. I mean, Carolina was up 4 with 3.5 minutes to go and didn't win the ball game. And some of the things that they did against Alabama in the Sweet 16 loss showed back up. I mean, Jalen Withers. I mean, yes, an open three. There's a reason why you're open. I know he had made previous threes prior, but is that the right time for you to take that shot? And on the other end, you miss a rotation and Kansas gets a bucket. That's a 5-point swing. And so I think it's okay for people to be frustrated there because I'm frustrated. We're an old team. We've got a group that's been around together. I don't understand how the best player in the country isn't taking the shots when the game is on the line. Like if I'm going to lose games, I want to lose with RJ Davis shooting the ball, not Jalen Washington, not Jalen Withers, not Elliot Cadeau. That's just the simple fact of the matter. And I'm not mad at Hubert for not calling a timeout. That's what Roy Williams would have done in that situation. I believe in everything that Roy Williams did, but I just don't understand how in that sequence how your best player, and I think you got to credit Kansas for taking him away, but some of that's on your fifth year senior where he just has to go get the ball. And
He tried to. Cadeau didn't give it to him. So
and if it ends up with you forcing a shot, then that's fine because I think I'd much rather live with a forced shot from R.J. Davis, the best guard in the country, than a settling shot from Jalen Withers and Jalen Washington. There's a reason why Kansas left them open, and they rewarded them by putting the ball in the bottom of the net.
Withers is not the most frustrating one to me. That's a shot that you simply just have to make. And yet again, I mean, look, man, end of last year, didn't make the shot. This year, you're shooting better, but that's the part of your game that you have to work on. If you get those shots late in games, you have to be able to hit them. The Jalen Washington thing was frustrating. There is no doubt about that. The reason that RJ didn't have the ball was because RJ had to try to set everything else up because no one else moved without the ball. They just decided to stand around. So that one, you can blame guys like Cadeau and Trimble for not doing their part on that play and basically forcing him to have to pass it off to Jalen Washington. Now, did he think that he was going to take that shot? Probably not. He was probably imagining, I'm going to give it off to him, try to get back, back to a position where I can get the ball back, and then I will take the shot. I think that's probably the thinking if you're RJ Davis. I mean, look, you're not going to carry it over. You're not going to be frustrated with your teammates and just ask them what the hell is going on out there. But I mean, yeah, you would have liked to get the ball in those situations. I thought final shot of the game, there was an opportunity for Cadeau to get RJ Davis the ball. He chose not to. I don't know why. I thought he held on to it a little too long. Even if you give it up to RJ and then he gets it back to you because he feels like you have a better look, I think that would have been better. And that goes into something that we talked about in the first half of the first two games of the season, that Carolina just doesn't move the ball enough. There are times where the ball gets stuck. We're trying to play NBA style basketball where we're trying to take guys one-on-one and just hope that it works and we can find a lane to the basket. That's not how it works at this level. You've got to be able to move the ball. There are guys that simply, just because there is more buy-in on the defensive end of the floor, do a better job of staying in front of their guys. And so I think you can be frustrated a little bit with the execution down the stretch of the game, but also I'm going to tell you, if there's a game that you want this to happen in, it's this game. This is the second game of the year. I hate that it has to come against Kansas, but if this ultimately means that Carolina wins Maui because they have this sort of test that they can look back to and point to late in those games, then I'm going to take it. I wish it didn't have to come against Kansas, but it's a learning experience that this team really needs, which is rely on your veteran players. Late in games, it should be RJ Davis and Seth Trimble taking shots. The rest of this group, you need to try to find a way to get the ball into their hands, unless you are wide open if your name is Elliot Cadeau.
And I think I just want to reiterate, credit Hubert Davis, credit Bill Self for scheduling this game, knowing how early it would have to be because of other non-con committals. And it'll be the same thing next year when Kansas comes to Chapel Hill. It's going to be an early game that Carolina and Kansas will have a little bit time to prepare for, but they won't know truly who they are by the time that they take the court. So it was a fun night. It was a great night for the sport. Just unfortunate that Carolina comes up on the short end of the stick. You take a look at the box score. Carolina shot just 43% from the field. They were 27 of 63. Meanwhile, Kansas was 49%. They were 37 of 76. Both teams struggled from the perimeter. Carolina 7 of 23 from deep. That rounds down to 30%. Remember, I said they had to hit 8 to 12 threes to have a chance to win this game, but they defended the three-line better. Kansas just 6 of 21 from behind the three-point line. What you got to love, and it's just an oddity that it happened in this arena. Carolina 28 of 31 from the foul line. That was their offense in the second half. And you got to, I think, one of the better adjustments Hubert Davis made at halftime, opened the floor. You were basically playing at different points because you were so small, 5 out, but you just kept driving the ball. Kansas had a hard time containing the dribble, and they kept fouling you and putting you at the charity stripe. Carolina 28 of 31. Meanwhile, Kansas just 12 of 17. The big bugaboo, though, 11 Carolina turnovers that led to 16 Jayhawk points. And on the flip side, Kansas just turned it over 4 times, and Carolina got 2 points off those turnovers. The rebounding margin, Carolina did out-rebound Kansas 40-39 for the game, 30-27 on the defensive glass in favor of Carolina. They did get out-rebounded on the on the offensive glass, though, 12-10. Second chance points, Carolina had 8. Kansas had 14. Bench points, 42 for Kansas, 24 for Carolina. But when you've got Zeke Mayo and A.J. Storr coming off the bench like Kansas does right now, those bench numbers are going to be a little bit inflated. Points in the paint, advantage Kansas, 50-32. Fast break points went Carolina's way, 17-13. Carolina assisted on 13 of their 27 made baskets, so nearly half. Kansas with 18 assists on their 20 or on their 37 made baskets, so nearly half for them. There was 5 times the game was tied. There were 6 lead changes, and ultimately Carolina led for 7 minutes and 25 seconds. Transition now into the quote of the game from what Hubert Davis said, and I'm just going to read it to you, not going to play the audio. He said in his post-game press conference, quote, "I told them at halftime that things can change and things can change quickly, and our will and our want to desire at the defensive end of the floor raises." And it's a simple message, but it's a true message. Carolina didn't defend in the first half. Didn't bring the intensity. There wasn't good communication. The effort at times was downright poor, considering there were, I think, 3 transition lob dunks that Kansas got where Carolina just simply didn't get back and was caught looking at the basketball, which just simply cannot happen in that environment. And then in the second half, and it wasn't really, in my opinion, from what I can tell, any tactical changes. Like Carolina they didn't full court press, they didn't run and jump, they didn't do anything to speed Kansas up. They just played harder. And all of a sudden, when they played harder and they played with a little bit of fight and a little bit of toughness and a little bit of grit, they got a stop, they'd go down and either score or get fouled. And that's how they effectively got back into the ball game. I think the one thing you got to look at it and say is that I think Hubert Davis has the pulse of his team where he can challenge them the way that he challenged them in the halftime locker room, and they responded. I think most teams 9 times out of 10 in that situation, they fold over and they play dead and they get blown out. This is Carolina. And we expect to fight for 40 minutes. We expect to run. And I think you got to be pleased with the way that they responded in the second half, because I do think that's something that they can build upon is that, okay, we cannot play our best half, but we can still turn it up at halftime and compete harder, and the scoreboard can change rather quickly.
Yeah, I mean, look, it really just speaks to the motivation that Hubert Davis is able to bring to this team. And maybe, even some of the veteran guys on this roster. Because, yeah, there are times where you would feel like, I mean, you go back to that team in 21-22, 22-23. There's a good chance that team rolls over, and that's just it. There's just no answer. Carolina, we walk away and we're asking ourselves, why in the world was it this bad? This team, again, you see that Hubert Davis has the pulse of this team. And they came out, and you knew immediately there was a difference with this group. They competed better on the defensive end of the floor. They rebounded better in the second half, even though slightly, they still rebounded better in the second half. And again, they weren't thrown off by the fact that they didn't shoot well in the first half. The confidence was still there, and guys were able to knock down shots. And I think, for this group, it's about figuring out how you can start games faster, because both of these games out of the gate, Carolina has had some moments defensively where they have not been strong. After the first half, you had allowed back-to-back halves where the opponent shot over 60% from the field. Like, that just cannot happen. You've got to find a way to provide more resistance, and it really just starts inside. I thought the second half, it was a much better job. I thought defensively, Van Allen Lubin played his tail off on the defensive end of the floor. I still think Jalen Washington is lacking in that area. I thought there were times where, especially in the first half, you saw where a guard has to try to fight through a screen. You allow one of their guards to get past you, and you don't see Jalen Withers step up and try to help in defending. Can't happen. You've got to be in position to contest shots, because against a team like this, with guards that shoot it this well, it's not going to work. And you're going to face a lot of really good teams where their guards are going to want to do the same thing that you saw tonight. So I think there's little lessons that can be learned that will help Carolina to adjust. But the other thing is, man, you can't make it as easy as it was in that first half to just put the ball inside and go to work. That it cannot be that easy for the opponent to score out of the 5 and 4 spots. If it is, then it's going to be a tough year for this team defensively. And what that means is, we saw it last year. Alabama played that way in the regular season. Kentucky played that way in the regular season. If that's going to happen, then you better be willing to shoot lights out as well from the field. And we saw in the first half, that's a dangerous recipe to mess with.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing to say is I still thought for the most part Carolina's shot selection was where you wanted it to be, where you needed it to be. There were probably maybe 3-4 shots at the most I didn't love, but outside of that, I still think they're getting good shots. They're getting quality shots. They're just not going in. And at some point, good offense will be rewarded, and those shots will start falling. Stat of the game, I went turnovers just simply because Carolina was -7 in that category. They committed 11 of them while only forcing 4 of them. And then they were -14 in points off of turnovers, where Kansas scored 16 points off of Carolina's 11 turnovers, and Carolina scored just 2 points off of the 4 Kansas turnovers. We said going in, you had to limit to probably anywhere from 8 to 10, while also getting after Kansas. That didn't happen. They were able to get the transition points you weren't able to get. And when you look at it top to bottom, that's one of the factors why Carolina lost the ball game. So now we'll get fully into thoughts, takeaways, and discussion. And just want to reiterate that love the effort, love the fight, the grit that this team showed. I think if this is something we can expect this team to play with for 40 minutes every single night, then A, they're going to be good. B, they're going to win a lot of games. And C, they're going to be a fun team to root for. But you play to win the game. And I don't think that Hubert Davis will be satisfied with a 3-point defeat. I don't think the players are going to be satisfied with a 3-point defeat. And I don't think the fan base should be satisfied with a 3-point defeat. I know it's November. I know we got a long way to go. We got a lot of big games coming up, Maui, Bama, and others in the non-con. And then, of course, once you get into the ACC slate. But I do think it's okay to be disappointed in the result if you have the proper context. which is that they did some really good things in the second half that could propel them to win to win a game the next time they're in that type of situation, playing a top flight opponent, whether it be at home, on the road, or at a neutral court.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the important thing to recognize here is I don't think anybody's saying that they're satisfied with the result. I did not see anybody that said, oh, great, we lost close. That was what we were hoping to do. I think that you are encouraged by the fact that this team was down 20 and they found a way to not only come back and make this a competitive game, they took the lead and had a chance to win this game, should have won this game. Frustrated is the best way to put it. I think it's frustrated but encouraged. Andrew Carter of the News and Observer wrote that this was a crushing loss. That's asinine. This is not a crushing loss. This team is not going to let this affect them moving forward because you lost a game to Kansas that you shouldn't have even been in to begin with. If you looked at the way that they played early in the game. So I think that it's one of those ones that, you walk away disappointed. For Elliot Cadeau, he probably feels like he could have hit that jump shot. I think, he looked at it. The shot was online. It just didn't have enough length on it. So I think there are reasons to walk away, not with a smile on your face, but feeling like we've got a really competitive team. Because the team, I will say this, the team that you saw on the other side, I hate to say it because I can't stand them, and I hate them even more after tonight. That is a Final Four caliber team. Because you go back to last year, what was their biggest issue? They had the talent, and they had injury issues. They didn't have depth. This group, you've got talent, you've got depth, and it's spread out throughout the entire team. This is a really, really good Kansas team. So the fact that you can compete with this team and that you should have beaten this team shows you that you are just as good as you thought you were going to be. Like fans, we said it. I thought in the first half, I'm not going to lie to you, I thought this was an Elite 8 caliber team. When you close the game out, that's an Elite 8 caliber. That's a team that can certainly get there. It's just about being able to execute down the stretch. And I feel like this team's going to know when it really gets to the games that matter. And I'm not saying this game didn't matter, but the games in conference play that you need to be able to win a conference title and ultimately position yourself where you need to be to make a run in the tournament, they will know who to rely on and how to close games, because the guy that is controlling everything for this team, RJ Davis, has been closing games for 3 years now. He will be ready. He showed you the other night against Elon that he is certainly ready to do that.
Yeah, I do think, just to add some context to why it's okay to be encouraged coming out of the defeat, although I'm really disappointed because of how much I wanted this as a fan. Carolina lost by 3 with Elliot Cadeau shooting 3 of 11, RJ Davis shooting 3 of 15, and Seth Trimble shooting 4 of 10. So everyone shot 40% or worse from the field in your backcourt, and you lost by 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times that's going to happen moving forward. They're all three going to shoot that bad. And I don't know how many times they're all three shoot that bad and the game is close. So the second takeaway is, we know how many question marks exist in this front court. Ultimately, what this front court ends up being will determine the ceiling of this team. It took 2 games for you to really hit home that, man, them not landing a Clifford Amore, one of those big-time bigs in the portal, might be what holds this team back from accomplishing the things we want to accomplish. I thought, Vin Allen Lubin played really well off the bench, 10 points, 3 rebounds, was perfect from the field, but only played 14 minutes because he fouled out. And the moving screen they fouled him out on was an egregious. I mean, you just don't foul a guy out on that type of call.
Both of his second half fouls were horrible. They were just touch fouls that were really bad.
Jalen Washington, look, he had 7 points, 9 boards in 18 minutes. He was 3 of 5 from the field, and maybe I'm being too critical. Maybe I'm asking too much. Not good enough, especially on the defensive end of the floor where Hunter Dickinson bullied him and had his way with him all night long. Tyjon Claude had his first run of action tonight. He played 4 minutes, but picked up 3 fouls in 4 minutes. James Brown also got some action tonight. He scored 2 points, and who knows? I mean, that buzzer-beating bucket on an offensive putback may have been what fueled the run in the second half that got Carolina back in the game. So after Claude and Brown didn't see the floor against Elon, they find themselves on the floor at Kansas because Carolina was in some god awful foul trouble. Jalen Withers an up and down, I think, night overall, just because of at the most important time of the game he missed a three and turned the ball over. But you have to like his night for in totality 11 points, 4 of 6 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3, and grabbed 9 rebounds, and was really in the second half, I thought, a difference maker on the defensive end of the floor and really gave Carolina a chance whenever they put the ball inside. And then the last guy, K. Tyson, the struggle is real. And this adjustment from playing at Belmont to North Carolina is proving to be a lot tougher than obviously we expected within the fan base. And I think it's more than the local and the national media expected as well. He played just 1 minute and did not do anything of significance other than airballing a jump shot. So you look at the front court. It took to game 2 for them to experience their first foul trouble of the season. I think in a lot of ways they overcame it because they came back in the second half and they got a lead and they defended Hunter Dickinson a lot better. But it didn't take very long for us to look at the front court and say, yeah, we wish there was X, Y, or Z guy in the portal that Carolina went after, because that might have been the difference in the game had they landed one of those guys in the portal back earlier this offseason.
Yeah, it certainly could have been. I think that's the frustrating part, because I think we saw that Jalen Washington has not taken that step, not defensively. He's going to be a liability there probably the majority of the season. And look, players can grow. We saw it with Armando last year. He started the year. He was not the player that he was defensively by the end of the season. So there is room for him to grow. But the thing is when you play some of these top teams in the country, which is where we think this team is going to be when they get to the Elite Eight, God forbid they get to the Final Four, you will see big men that can dominate you inside. And you saw tonight, he just doesn't have the physical build to be able to defend against these guys. It's just not there. And that's frustrating. There's no doubt about that. I like the way that Vin Allen Lubin was defending in the second half. I thought it was really, really encouraging what you saw from him for a smaller guy to defend that way. And I said exactly what our guy Amit Patel here says. If Vin Allen Lubin doesn't foul out, they win this game, because I thought he was better on both ends. I thought what he did offensively, he did a great job of being able to set screens. Even though he wasn't rebounding at nearly as high of a rate, it just felt like what he brought defensively sort of outweighed what he wasn't bringing rebound-wise. Now, here's the thing, and we'll talk about, how that front court looks a little bit with our discussion topic. He is going to have to rebound better if Carolina is going to play him more minutes. That's the one thing that you want to see, is we want to be able to see him compete as a rebounder, because he did it in the SEC and he was able to make his living on the offensive glass. 3 rebounds is going to be tough. But if you've got Jalen Withers rebounding the way that he is, then you should be fine. When it comes to Jalen Withers, it's really simple. Jalen Withers is one of these types of players that has moments where you really like what he brings to the table because he competes defensively. He rebounds. He can knock down the three ball every once in a while. Then there's other times where he takes a frustrating foul. He turns the ball over in a frustrating moment. He misses an open shot. He is one of those frustrating type of players that will drive you crazy, but ultimately your team needs him. And especially because I'm going to be honest, what you saw tonight from Cade Tyson, unless he starts knocking down shots, you ain't going to see that dude. You are not going to see. He will not play. He will turn into Paxson Wojcik because he simply brings nothing defensively. And if you can't even hit iron on a jump shot, then you are not going to play here. So they need him to improve. They need him to eventually be able to knock down shots. But right now, I'm going to tell you, I would play James Brown over him. I think that James Brown is a guy that should see some time moving forward in small spurts if you get into foul trouble. We saw what Tyjon Claude brings. Tyjon Claude is very similar to James Okonkwo from last year. I don't see him making a massive impact here. And I know he's played in the ACC before, all that, whatever. He's going to be able to rebound, but he's going to be a guy that's probably going to struggle to stay out of foul trouble. James Brown, I think there's legitimate potential there. As a guy that's undersized, I thought at the end of the half, he brought some energy, he rebounded well, and he did a good job of finishing a bucket that, you're right, I think you could think it's crazy that cutting a lead from 17 to 15 means something, but that was what I was asking when there was like a minute 45 to go in the first half. I said, can you get it to 15? Because then, for some reason, that 2 points, it makes it feel like there is a chance. And that's exactly what happened. That was a huge play in the game. So, I mean, look, I think there's plenty of time for this front court to grow before you play your next significant game in Maui. But there's still there are reasons to be legitimately concerned about this front court and the lack of height because it showed in this game.
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and sit right here because it's the most pressing issue with this team 2 games in.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an argument and a case to be made for Van Allen Lubin to start over Jalen Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Part of this could just be that Jalen Washington is a guy that is more comfortable coming off the bench and being a guy that, brings the energy and changes the game, and adds even a little bit of a scoring punch down low for Carolina off the bench. I think for Van Allen Lubin, there's the experience factor there. There's a guy that's done it, having played at Notre Dame, at Vanderbilt, and I think you saw tonight that outside of the fouls, like when he got into when the game was flowing and they were going up and down the court, that guy was, yes, he's small. He doesn't have the size that we're used to having in the front court. And Jay Billis made sure to talk about that 27,000 times on the broadcast. But there's a toughness there. There's a grit to him. There's a I'm gonna roll my sleeves up and I'm gonna go to work type of attitude that I think you have to like. I think you have to resonate. He could lose the headband, and maybe we could really talk about him about him being a starter. But I do think just looking at Jalen Washington, a guy that it appears hasn't put on any muscle. Is still getting pushed around way too easily. He hasn't really done anything the first 2 games offensively to justify him being in the starting lineup. Carolina's got a week off before they're back home against American next Friday night. A lot of time to review the film and really get back to work. I wouldn't be surprised if Van Allen Lubin finds himself in the starting lineup because I do think right now he's been the best quote unquote big man that has played for the Heels the first 2 games of the year.
Yeah, let's just roll with the 5 spot because, big man is a loose term with this year's team. I mean, look, there's definitely a case. I think that is certainly because I said to you that I think that there is a case for him to be in the starting lineup. Ultimately, the starting lineup really doesn't matter. We talk about that so much. Honestly, at this point, I think we've gotten to the point in basketball where you should talk more about the closing lineup. Do you think that Vin Allen Lubin should be the guy that closes games for Carolina at the 5? I do. First of all, better free throw shooter. So that makes perfect sense for the games that you're going to be playing where you're hoping that you're in the lead. But more importantly, it's really just, honestly, it's the willingness on the defensive end. And I'm not calling into question the effort from Jalen Washington. I just don't think that I think he knows that he's not that good on the defensive end of the floor. And that there's really just nothing he can do against bigger bigs. It seems like Vin Allen Lubin is a guy who does a much better job of anchoring himself, of handling guys that want to try to play back to the basket. We saw that. Biggest concerns with him. First half, you saw the height disadvantage when he was matched up against Dickinson. And if you can consistently hit those mid-range shots over him, that's going to be a concern when you play teams that have bigger bigs. And that's why you can always sort of change your strategy. When you play teams that are smaller, when you play teams that want to play small, okay, yeah, Vin Allen Lubin can be the guy that you use for 25, 27 minutes. And then Jalen Washington is the guy that's on for 13 to 15. Well, when you play some of those teams that are bigger, maybe you need that length from Jalen Washington. So maybe it's more even, 20-20. Maybe even, depending on how he's playing in that game, maybe it's 22-18. That's how I think you're going to have to do this throughout this year, is you're going to have to adjust to the teams that are on the other side. Yes, you want to play your game, but at the same time, if a team has a big guy that is really that effective, like if there is another Zach Edey, dude, you ain't playing Vin Allen Lubin against him and just praying. No, you're going to need Jalen Washington's height to try to match up with it. So I think that's how Carolina has to do this moving forward. But tonight, I do truly believe that if you had Vin Allen Lubin in there, and I think that Hubert would have rode him because he was the hot hand, he was making plays. Carolina would have won this game because I think he was a difference maker. You could see how much he was frustrating Hunter Dickinson. And you saw, man, that late possession, you said it was really a rotation. It was really more that Dickinson just was able to position Jalen Washington where he wanted him and allow for that easy lob inside. Jalen Washington just got worse. Where I think if Vin Allen Lubin is on the floor, I don't think he's able to do that.
I agree with that. He may score. He would have earned it a lot more than
Yep.
than what Jalen Washington made him quote unquote earn it. So yeah, I mean I think it's fascinating. I do think right now, and as much as I hated the shot, I do think Jalen Withers has done a good job at the 4 spot. I think he has solidified himself right now as to be that guy.
No
and
question.
and frankly, that's a good thing. I don't know if this is overreaction. I know it's 2 regular season games combined with 2 exhibition games. I don't know if Cade Tyson can play at this level, or I don't know if he can play at this level this year.
I'm telling you, dude, it's somebody said in the offseason, and I thought it was a bit harsh because of how well he shot. Unless that shot comes to him, he's Paxson Wojcik. He ain't gonna play. He cannot defend. He can't rebound. Like,
I mean, the thing is that when you're the type of player that he is, all of that stuff comes with if the ball's going through the basket or not, which is not a good thing. Defending and rebounding should not be determined by what you do on offense. Not at this level. The NBA, that's what the NBA product is. But at the college level, by God, go to get in a stance and guard somebody, and get a hip on somebody and go box someone out and get to the board. But and look, there's a good thing is that he's got another year that he could stay here. If there's going to be an extended period of adjustment, but I think my eye's very good. I think I know what I see is good or not. He's not an ACC caliber player right now. And that's why I think the fact that Withers has solidified himself at that 4 spot has been a godsend, because I think you're looking at a situation, and Carolina went to it multiple times in the second half where there were 4 guards on the court and a big. And it's not maybe what you want on the other end of the court, because you're going to be that much smaller. But it's Hubert's job to play the best 5 or the 5 that give him the best chance. And with Withers being in foul trouble tonight as well, like sometimes you have to do he had to do that tonight and have to do that moving forward. So I'll be interested to see what if he makes that change next week against American. Remember, he flirted with the starting lineup last year, and then we ultimately settled on what it ended up being, and which was Davis, Cadeau, Ryan, Ingram, Baycott. You got a little bit of time, but if we want to go to Maui and we want to win Maui, we got to have a little bit more understanding of who we are, what we're capable of doing. And right now, we're just not there in that front court. And a big reason why Carolina lost the game was, and defensively, man, just not where I think we thought they would be, considering how good they were a year ago. And you brought back a lot of that personnel. You give up 92 points. You gave up 53 in the first half. More importantly, you gave up 33 points in the first 10 minutes of the ball game. And Kansas was able to shoot the ball, very, very efficiently in the first half. Kind of like what you saw in the second half against Elon, where, yes, some of it was Kansas made shots. The majority of it was Kansas got to their spots on the floor where their guys wanted the ball, and they were able to make impactful plays. Mm-hmm. I think this lineup is built to press. I think this lineup is built to run and jump, considering you've got Trimble and Drake Powell, 2 of the best individual defenders, not just on this team, but in the conference. Have you been taken aback by Carolina's struggles defensively? Because, we said going into the year this team was going to race up and down the court and score a lot of points, but I thought there'd be a little bit more buy-in on the other end of the court. And through 2 games with what they allowed Elon to do, scoring 76 points and shooting 50% in the second half, and then what Kansas did tonight, this team's got a long way to go on that end of the floor.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I'm not going to say I'm shocked because we talked about it before the season started. Now, we thought it was going to be because there were a lot of possessions, and I still think that'll be part of some of the games that you play moving forward because you're going to play at your pace. That was not the case tonight. But again, you saw first half. I mean, yes, part of it was it just didn't seem like they were ready for what they walked into. The other part of it is it's just the height of the team, man. You got guys that just shoot over guys. And that's the thing. You're playing small. So that's going to be part of it. Now what that means is you've got to force more turnovers because you saw that tonight. That is one of the biggest reasons that Carolina lost this game was because you didn't force more turnovers, and that kept you from being able to establish your pace. If they establish their pace in this game, they win. Because Kansas, you saw it a few times. Kansas can't handle running like that. They've got athletic dudes, not as athletic as Carolina's got. Because everybody on Carolina's roster this year is athletic. That's the one thing they can do is get up and down the floor at a high pace. And so that's how they're going to have to do things. Yeah, you want to see a little bit more of a competitive edge, especially early in the game against both Elon and Kansas. I thought there were times in that first half against Elon. Second half, I thought it was more guys just making shots. I thought the first half against Elon, it was the fact that sometimes you left guys open. That just really comes down to communication. We saw that a few times tonight. And then part of it is, man, if you can't defend inside, there's really nothing you can do. I know we had one play in the first half where I forget which big, I think it was Lubin was getting back down by Hunter Dickinson. And Elliot Cadeau comes over to help, ends up leaving a guy, hit a shot from the outside. We said, you know what? Can't really argue there because you needed to double. You have to try to take that away. And if the guy just makes a shot from the outside, it is what it is. We have to live with that. Now, Jay Billis said that he could have came over a little bit earlier. When I looked on the replay, yeah, he was probably right. He could have probably helped a little bit earlier, would have made it a little bit easier to close out on the guard. But at the same time, like, if you can't defend inside without having to double frequently, you're not going to be a great defensive team. It just ain't going to happen unless teams don't shoot well against you. And right now, you're 0 for 2 when it comes to that category. These teams have knocked down shots against you. So I think part of it is going to be that you have to accept this team is not going to be great defensively. Could they still be good defensively, though? Yes, that comes into that comes back to a buy-in factor and being bought in for 40 minutes. That's what you need from this team. But this is not going to be a team that's going to defend at the level that they did last year. I just don't see how that can happen unless you've got guys that are going to progress that much defensively on the interior.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I think the best way for them to play defense is to press and to run and trap and really just really just speed the game up and really try to get opponents playing faster than the way that they want to play. So I guess one last thing we'll touch on here before we get out. We're going on an hour here late on a Friday night. This is now the 5th straight loss to Kansas that you and I have endured. Obviously, Duke is in a different stratosphere in terms of hatred, rivalry, all that nature, all that fun stuff.
Here we go. I know where this is going.
I know. I know what Nova did hurt. I know what Nova did broke us as fans. It's one of the worst moments of my life watching Carolina lose that national title game in the way that they got beat. Kansas to me is my second most hated program, and I think tonight just reinforced the hatred that exists. And there is some there are some similarities with Duke where, by God, they've won so much that you got to respect it, and there's so much history and tradition that Kansas brings to the table. I mean, the guy that had been in the game coached there. Bog Allen, was there for a long time. Bill Self tied him tonight on the all-time win list at Kansas. Hates that he had to do it against us, but man, like, look, I know what Nova did. We'll never forget. Kentucky, when they were at their height under Calipari, was very hateable. Of course, we've got the rivalry with NC State. I felt the way I felt about Virginia and Tony Bennett for all those years. But when I said it in the preview, I would be willing to sacrifice a loss to Duke to beat these guys because I'm freaking tired of losing to them. And I just know for me tonight, after playing them in their building and really watching the way that crowd just acted and reacted, and the way that Bill Self whined and complained, it was like a temper tantrum on the sidelines. This solidified my hatred that Kansas basketball, and I know Carolina's got connections to them with Dean Smith, Roy Williams, and so many others. But man, I hate those guys. And next year when they come to Chapel Hill and my butt's in the Smith Center watching them play them, Carolina better give me a victory, because I don't know if I can handle watching us lose in person to that program from Lawrence.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's like I said, next year will hopefully be the year that it happens. If you don't see them again later this year, which I would love to be able to beat them in the NCAA tournament, that would be so satisfying to once again continue the beautiful tournament failures of one of the most overrated coaches of our generation in Bill Self. But I do not have them. After last year, there is a very clear 2 to me. It is State. Yeah, I cannot stand them. And I can see exactly why Roy Williams hated them as much as he does. Hell, they have a case to be right there 1B. I mean, that's how bad last year was. Man. I would still probably have Nova because the way that that national championship game went down, and I know you had a 15-point halftime lead against Kansas in 22, but the way that title game went down, you thought if you went to overtime, you were going to win it. And the fact that they took away a title from Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson is too much to forgive. Anytime that program loses, I love it. I hate their guts. I hate every player that was on that team. I hate every coach that is on that team. Jay Wright, when he comes on my television, I turn him off. I don't want to hear from you. I don't care how good of an analyst you are. I hate you with a passion. And look, Bill Self, I can't stand Bill Self. Like I said, he is unbelievably overrated. People kiss his ass, and he is a guy that has failed over and over again in March. So I think he has a reputation. He is very much like Tom Izzo. That's how I think he should be remembered, but people remember him as a better coach than Tom Izzo. Don't really know why. I would have them a very solid fourth. Now, I will let it be known that I really hate when it comes to college sports. There is passionate hate for these schools, unlike any other in professional sports. There are teams that you hate in professional sports. Like as Mets fans, we hate the Atlanta Braves. They are a clear number one. And then after that, I mean, there's other teams that we hate. But I don't know if it's the sheer amount of teams as you have in college sports. And I don't know if it resonates nearly as much as college sports. It is a deep hatred. So, they're fourth on my hatred list, but it's a very, very strong fourth.
Okay, well, I've got them a little bit higher. You've got them a little bit lower. I'd love a rematch with Kansas in the tournament. If not, we got them in our place next year, and I'm praying to the basketball gods to let us get a victory. I was willing to sacrifice a loss to Duke to beat them. May not want to know what I'm willing to sacrifice next year to get a win over Kansas in our home building when they make their first ever pilgrimage to Chapel Hill. That is going to wrap up this edition of the Four Corners podcast. Guys, before we let you go, we encourage you to visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. We spent the day getting you ready for the game with Kansas. The recap will be posted tomorrow morning. We prioritized the podcast over the recap article tonight. So we'll have that recap in the morning. Have a chance for me to kind of digress, get some of the emotions out of my body before I write that recap article. Tar Heel football off this weekend, but recruiting news around the program that we'll have you covered on. And before you know it, we'll be getting you ready on Monday with an injury report going into the game against Wake Forest, where Carolina will look to secure a bowl berth. To stay up to date on the latest, guys, simply put, we just want you to visit the website every single day. That's HeelToughBlog.com for the latest and the best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us by now. Every major podcasting platform, simply search the Four Corners Podcast where we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the basketball season. Carolina's off for a week. So you're probably sitting there thinking, well, they're not going to be back till maybe Wednesday or Thursday, preparing for the next game. Wrong. There'll be guests on the show next week talking Carolina basketball after the first week of the season. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any of those great interviews we have coming up. Well, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.